Conservative MP and Government Minister Steve Barclay, who's Minister for the Cabinet Office and joins me now. We shall be talking about that, Minister. But first off, you won't be surprised. I have to put to you the findings of what's been called a devastating or damning report. To list my listeners now, many of whom possibly have lost loved ones, and it would appear that it's a rather toxic mix of government inaction and scientific advice. What do you say? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nick. Obviously, the report came out at midnight, so I've not had an opportunity to read it as yet. But what we did throughout the pandemic was to follow the scientific advice. Obviously, what we know now about that unprecedented event is different to what we did at the start, but we got the vaccine deployed. We protected the NHS from the surge we saw in other countries. But what happened to individual families was obviously devastating, and a devastating personal loss. And our hearts go out to them. It was a global pandemic. It was an unprecedented time. And where there are lessons to learn from that is why we've committed to an inquiry to ensure that for those families, the right lessons are learned from that very difficult period.
Doesn't help if you've lost grandma, does it?
No, and I think...
So you can apologise for that, can you? Government's COVID mistakes have killed many thousands is one headline. Elderly were just an afterthought is another headline. And this is from a report by some of your colleagues, your own MPs. So you're able to apologise for that, aren't you?
No, I think we followed the scientific advice. Obviously, if
that wasn't respectfully, sir. That wasn't the question, Minister. Are you able to apologise?
Well, we need to look at the report. As I say, it's only just come out. We need to ensure that where there are lessons to learn. I don't, for a minute...
Might I politely ask you not to say lessons to be learnt again? That's 3 times we've heard lessons will be learnt. I'm just wondering why you find it unable to apologise.
Because we followed the scientific advice we had at the time.
Which
and the
might be
knowledge
flawed,
we
of
had
course.
at that point... The knowledge we had at that point was very different. So on things like asymptomatic testing, what we now know is very different. Now, we did move quickly in response to the pandemic. We had guidance out to the social care sector in February of 2020. We had an action plan in April. We put in place support, £2.4 billion of support to social care through things like the infection control. We moved to protect our NHS. We got a vaccine deployed. We built from scratch a test and trace capacity.
You talk about moving. You also fatally moved elderly people into care homes, which killed them. All I'm asking for, I appreciate no one did it deliberately. You all worked damn hard. It would appear in many instances the advice that was flawed. I'm just asking on a human nature. Surely you apologise to my listeners who lost relatives.
Well, I recognise it's devastating, and my heart goes out to any family, any of your listeners where
Minister,
they
what's
lost a loved
so
one.
hard about the word sorry?
Because we followed the scientific advice that we had at the time, Nick, and we moved.
We'll move on in a minute. I mean, there's no point going on and on with this, Mr. Barclay, but on a human level, as Minister for the Cabinet Office, you can't apologise to people who lost loved ones.
Well, I'm saying if we followed the scientific advice and the knowledge we had at the time, Nick, that was a logical thing to do. But what we're committed to doing for those families is having an inquiry, ensuring that we address any issues from that time.
But
we followed the knowledge that we had at that time. We followed the advice that we had at that time, Nick.
And it was slightly... right, but when they're not, you apologise. It's human nature, isn't it?
But what's inherent in, as I say, we need to look at this report, but what's inherent in it is did we take logical decisions based on the information that we had at that time?
So it's the scientific advisors who need to apologise then?
No, it's based...
No one apologised? Sorry, I'm sure I misheard that.
This is about...
Thousands died needlessly and no one has to apologise.
With hindsight, Nick, we know different things about this virus now.
I'm not asking for
we
that,
knew
respectfully.
At the time. The point is we followed the guidance at the time. We moved quickly to get the vaccine deployed. We moved to protect the NHS from the surge that we saw in other countries. And we acted on the information. Now, with hindsight, of course, we know much more about asymptomatic infections now than we did at that point. But we took logical decisions based on the information that we had.
I say again, I'm sure, and this is the last time we will get up to this, hopefully good news about supply. I have no doubt that everybody did what they did for what they thought to be the right reasons. I don't for a second think people are sitting there plotting. But candidly, a lot was wrong. I'm just asking on a human level for an apology.
Well, I recognise the devastation to the families concerned, but we took logical decisions at the time based on the information we had.
All right, let's move to other matters, and I know that you're keen to talk about this because people are very concerned about supplies in the shops. There's a degree, let's not overdo this, but in Cardiff, for whatever reason, there are no strawberries. In Greenwich, there's no tonic water. I don't know whether this is going to help, but you are trying to resolve some of these issues with the deal that's been done. Minister?
We are, and we've also brought in Sir Dave Lewis, the former chief executive of Tesco, to work very closely with industry. As you know, from the start of the pandemic, Nick, we've got extremely resilient supply chains in the UK. I mean, what we saw with the recent petrol event, where we were actually delivering more to forecourts than was being sold, but it was driven by a consumer response to a particular story. But we have resilient supply chains. We're working very closely with industry. We brought in one of the industry experts within government to ensure that our response addresses the points that are being raised, and we have a very resilient supply line.
What are we doing? Because when we're through the worst of it, Minister, now is possibly not the time. We have to get more men and women to drive trucks. There's no doubt about that. Can we look at some form of government initiative? Could there even be some kind of loan scheme, much as students get to borrow some money? Could we look at something like that to help these men and women actually do the training?
Well, you're absolutely right. We need to improve working conditions for HGV drivers. That is important to retention, but also to recruitment. So things like conditions at lorry parks, which clearly need to improve. Wages are improving. That will attract people in. We're making it easier for people to get the skills to be HGV drivers. So we've got boot camps, 5,000 places. We're increasing the number of tests so we can get people through the testing process quicker. But ultimately, this is about wages and conditions. And things like lorry parks where the conditions aren't adequate.
Is it the role of government
working
to build,
with the industry?
Is it the role of government then to build better lorry parks? I would have thought that was down to Granada or whoever owned these lorry parks, or Premier Inn, I don't know. Isn't it their job?
Of course, it's to work with the industry. So we're looking at where are the areas where the government can assist on things like boot camps and skills and training and the testing regime. But it is for industry to improve the conditions and the wages. And that's why we're engaging with industry on this. It's a global problem, the shortage of HGV drivers, but it's also an opportunity for us to improve the working conditions of HGV drivers. I think the focus on supply chains has shone a light on the fact that those conditions are not good enough, and it's an opportunity to fix them.
And how much does it cost to be a truck driver, a lorry driver? Do we know how much the training costs?
In terms of, we're actually reducing those costs through the boot camps.
Course, you know, the tuition one needs and then applying for the actual test. What sort of money are we looking at there?
I don't have the precise figure, but part of the reason we're opening the boot camps, the 5,000, is to make it easier. We're expanding the opportunities through charities, particularly, for example, looking at specific groups as well. So we're making it easier for people to do those boot camps through DWP, and those will be starting in November.
The most difficult hurdle will be finding the cash, wouldn't it? If I wanted to train as a lorry driver, OK, I need a boot, but I also need to know how much it's going to cost me. Like when you turn to drive, you know how much you're going to pay per hour. Wouldn't it make sense that you had an idea how much it costs to be a truck trainer?
Well, and part of the increase in wages is obviously making it attractive, but also making
you don't get the wages until you've taken your test. I'm just saying...
No, indeed. But that's why we're making it easier with the boot camps for people to get the skills. We're making it easier for them to get their test. But also it's about the working conditions as well once they are qualified, having better working conditions as well. That's a key part of keeping people in the industry.
Just coming back to the first part of our conversation, has the Prime Minister sent round a note or an email in response to this report?
Well, the report came out, Nick, at midnight, so we've not had an opportunity to... It is indeed, but given that I'm on the media round, I think it's reasonable that I will have an opportunity to read this report later today.
And see, I'd have done it the other way around. Call me crazy, but when I read that this is a report that could have killed many thousands and is the most devastating report into failure of this site ever witnessed by a UK government, call me crazy, I might have put a call into Marbella and say, we need a response so that the bloke or woman going out on the rounds has an idea of how you're feeling. But I guess I'm just stupid because I believe in apologies, Minister. What say you?
No, we're having an inquiry in order that we can look at this in detail. But there's a huge amount of action that we took. We protected the NHS. We got the vaccine deployed. Okay. And we also put in place support in forms of the 2.4 billion of support that went into social care.
Grateful for your time today. Thank you very much. Cabinet Office Minister Steve Barclay appearing here on LBC, where at 8 o'clock news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the UK's response at the start of the coronavirus pandemic has been described as one of the country's worst ever public health failures. A report by 2 parliamentary committees has found thousands of lives could have been saved if the first lockdown had been imposed earlier. It says scientific advisers wrongly wanted to manage